Hello, this is Simon Mann in Multan, where the second test between Pakistan and England starts at 5 a.m. UK time tomorrow morning. Test match special will be on air at 4:25 on 5 Live Sports Extra and BBC Sounds to bring you the toss. We've moved 330 miles southwest from Islamabad, the scene of England's sensational victory in the first test. We took the scenic route, an 8-hour drive through stunning hills and then along the plains to Multan, while the players flew, although they were held up by fog for several hours. Multan is a city of nearly 2 million on the right bank of the Chenab River, and we're in the southern Punjab. It's only hosted 5 test matches, this ground, all this century, and only one since England's dramatic 22-run defeat here in 2005, but not one in December, when the days are short and the weather is cool at night. With me to look ahead is the BBC's cricket correspondent Jonathan Agnew and 2 more members of the test match special team, Alex Hartley and Atif Nawaz. Well, here we go again. Not much time for the players to recover from a gruelling game in Rawalpindi. England in the field for 252 overs.
That won't bother them. And looking at the way they've practiced today and talking to Ben Stokes, they're very chipper. To come here 1-0 up is a terrific position. They couldn't really have dreamt of that. They are going to have the battle against the elements again, though, and here we are, early afternoon as we chat now here, and the mist really hasn't really lifted. And if you take that into account, the Friday start, of course, with the extra long lunch for Friday prayers, again, you feel that they're going to be up against the clock, but that won't bother them. They'll give it a go. There'll be no sitting back on that 1-0 lead, I'm sure of that.
No, not at all. We know that this team don't like draws. We know that they'll always go for the win. So I'm excited to see what they do and how they play, because we know we're going to have even shorter playing hours than we had in the last test, just for the way the weather has been. It is quite glary out there. It is quite bright, but it's still, the sun is still going to set quite early.
And from conversely, Pakistan will be very keen to try and get back into it. There's some critique of that side in the first test match, that they were being overly defensive in their approach. But the loss in the first test, it prompts them to have to be more proactive, to come back into the series. It's a big series for them. Big crowds expected here as well in Multan. It's a 22,000 plus capacity here as well. And I've been told that they're expecting to fill most of that for 5 days, which kind of staggers me based on the location of the ground and how far it is. Yeah, getting here is going to be quite the thing. But I've been told there's a shuttle that takes you from the nearest car park and things like that. So they're expecting a big crowd, and that crowd will not accept Pakistan just folding.
Well, that's going to be extraordinary how they're going to get here, because a tremendous security presence here, and also the use of tractors across exit areas and entry areas. And they, to get in the ground today, they sort of rolled the tractor back and in came our bus. I've never seen that.
I don't think you're supposed to tell people that, Simon. It's like a security secret or something.
It's much tighter here than it was in Rawalpindi. They don't want to get it wrong here in Multan. We were confined to our hotel all day yesterday. You couldn't go outside. It was frustrating, but you kind of shrug your shoulders and accept it. Here at the ground, you're right. I mean, that is a really stiff security presence, isn't it? But, you get in, you take your time, and if that's what it takes to get cricket played at the moment here, then that's what it takes.
So they've received commendations, the city of Multan, for their treatment of the West Indies team, who were the last team to come and play a test match here, and because of the way they treated them and because of that high level of security, they were awarded this and the next test match that they're going to host here against New Zealand in a month or so. So, I mean, this is kind of de rigueur here in Multan for the foreseeable future.
Well, let's hear from the England camp now. Captain Ben Stokes, he's been speaking to Jonathan.
Here we are. You've had a few days to reflect on what happened in Rawalpindi. Are you still glowing, or have you sort of moved on?
Yeah, no, I think we've moved on, but obviously taken a lot of confidence in the way which we managed to get the result last week. But yeah, obviously all the focus is now on this big second test match.
Yeah. Reading the papers and so on, which you can now these days on the internet and so on, you've had a lot of praise, a lot of credit coming your way for the way you led the team. I mean, how do you feel about that? And are you surprised by it, or was it just kind of, well, that's what I'm here to do?
I think there's quite a lot of that sort of what I'm here to do, and obviously getting the privilege and the honour to lead this England team out at the moment it's amazing, and it's so enjoyable. And as much as I can speak and go out and lead and stuff like that, I obviously need everyone else in the squad to really buy into the mindset and the ethos about how we want to play Test cricket. So obviously I'm the person out in the middle there, sort of making the changes and setting the fields and stuff like that. But that can only go as far as the willingness of everyone else out there with me. And it's great to have the buy-in from everybody in terms of what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to go about playing Test cricket.
Yeah. Now the old textbooks would say you're one up, you've got two to play, you're on the subcontinent, flat pitches, they've got to make all the running, haven't they? Now you can just sit back.
No, I think it's very important for us to keep pushing forward and not be complacent with us coming into this game with a 1-0 lead. We want to leave here 2-0, and the best way of us to do that is obviously by giving ourselves the best opportunity with the way we go out and play, which will be very similar in terms of the first Test match. Who knows, it might not go to plan as well as it did last week, but it's something we'll certainly be trying, and I think the big thing for us this week is making sure that we don't get complacent.
Yeah, and so Mark Wood comes in to give some pace. Ollie Pope keeps wicket. Now that's an interesting decision that you've made.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Pakistan's a very hard place to come and win games of cricket, especially in the longer format, and understanding that, I think, makes decisions like this, as hard as they are, a little bit easier. It's obviously very tough on Folksy to miss out on this game with him. Obviously, the praise in which he receives from myself, Brendan, and the rest of the team is about his glove work behind the stumps. He still is England's #1 keeper. He still is the best keeper in the world, in my opinion. And one thing we did say to him is that don't take this as any sort of future markings on himself in this team. It's for this Test match and this Test match at the moment. So we had to make a decision on what we felt was best opportunity to create 20 chances out on this wicket, because it was tough going for us. But I think adding someone like Woody, who can bowl 150 kilometres an hour with the potential reverse swing, it's very hard to look past that. But yeah, Folksy, I don't need to keep blowing smoke up his backside to say how good he is, but he understands the reasoning for it. And it's important that we keep the communications with him about where he is in this team, because he's been a part of the journey from the whole way, and he still is going to be part of the journey going forward.
Ollie Pope was quite remarkable actually in the last game, to score 100 and then keep as much as he did, and much squatting up and down the spinners and so on. He must have been exhausted afterwards. Yeah,
I think for the individual performance that he put in last week was amazing, especially for someone who's not used to doing it. Batting at 3 out here is hard, and then to obviously back that up, keeping straight away was a fantastic effort. I thought he did a fantastic job behind the stumps, took some great catches, very good stumping as well. So this kind of sort of selection, we didn't have that on our radar before the tour started, but obviously with the squad in which we've got and the opportunity that sort of presents ourselves with now, with unfortunately Folksy being ill before, it's amazing how sort of you can look at things can work out. But look, the selection this week was all based around on how do we find the best way in picking a team to get 20 wickets, and we all, me and Brendan both thought that this was the best option for that.
Yeah. And will Pope bat at 3 regardless, or can he be fairly flexible about that? Yeah,
it's something we obviously communicated last week, was just keep talking to us on how you're going. Don't feel like you just have to do it, just to be like, nah, I'm all right, because it's a very important place to bat out here, number 3, and then also keeping is very important as well. So there is a sense of making sure that we're looking after him. And I've also mentioned to Ducky, in the unlikely chance that it will happen, just be having the back of your mind that you might take the gloves at some point if Popey's played a big innings, or he spent a lot of time out in the field behind the stumps keeping.
Well, the main talking point from that interview is the fact that Mark Wood is going to play, and England have left out Ben Foakes, or they're not going to include him in this team. I mean, he's done a strange tour actually. He was included and then he was ill, so he didn't play in the last Test match. He might have expected to play in this game, but he's not going to. It's all must-needs for England so they can get Mark Wood into the side.
Absolutely, and of course there is that constant doubt or concern about Mark Wood's ability to get through 5 days. Yeah, I mean, it is weird for Ben Foakes, isn't it? If he hadn't got the bug, then he would have played in the last match. Who knows what might have happened? And it was quite right, I think, Stokes there to talk about Pope's contribution in that last game, which was remarkable, really, to score 100 and to field keeping wicket for as much as he did. And I mean, I think I've kept wicket once very briefly. I'm not quite the right build for a keeper, and Ollie Pope is more, but even so, it is a really strenuous job, and you are stretching and using muscles that you don't normally do. So to go up and down as often as he did was remarkable. Just one or two things from there. He did say that they could be flexible about number 3. I mean, Root could bat at 3. If Pope's out there for ages keeping wicket and feels tired, then Root could come in. But also, interestingly, Ben Duckett, who also is a bit of a... Well, he's not quite as much a wicketkeeper as Pope, maybe, but he could be if Pope is again tired. Maybe he's scored runs, maybe he's keeping... He could actually come in and keep wicket. So, I mean, they really do. They don't stick to the rules, if you like, or the established framework at all this side. And Ben Stokes would literally do anything, it seemed.
That's what makes this Test side so special, isn't it? They are literally reinventing Test cricket. You know, they're saying, look, Ben Stokes is the best keeper in the world, but if we want results here in Multan, we're going to have to play our explosive batters, we're going to have to keep the same batting order, but we want to get Mark Wood in, and the only way we can do that is for Liam Livingstone. We don't want to make any more changes. We've seen the wicket, we know what it's going to play like, or at least we think we do. I mean, for me, I think it's going to turn a little bit. I think it will break up, unlike the previous pitch we had in Rawalpindi. But yeah, I just think the way that they are bold with their decision making, it makes you want to watch this team.
It's okay as long as he doesn't make a really pricey drop. Now you look back, of course, at Imam, who was dropped on 11 and he went on and got 100, but England won the game. He dropped another catch too down the leg side. So you know, there are weaknesses there, but he did put off a very good leg side catch and also a stumping. So at the moment he's in credit because England won, but it is a gamble on these sorts of pitches and against the sort of bowling as we're standing up to a lot. To have a temporary wicketkeeper behind the stumps is a big call.
I also don't think it says anything about Ben Stokes.
No.
I think they've, you know, Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes, they'll have said to him, look, this is literally the only reason you're not playing is because we want a result. And you know, Ben Stokes, if we're comparing his strike rates to the other batters that are in the team, he is slightly slower. He has been slightly slower. We've got explosive batters that are in this side, so you know, as long as the messaging has come across right, I think, you know, he'll sit down and say, you know what, I'm gutted, but it is what it is.
It does break convention, doesn't it? I mean, normally on these pitches, a test series like this, you would have your best wicketkeeper keeping wicket. He'd be one of the first names down on the sheet. So yet again, Stokes has sort of tore that sheet of paper up, thrown it away and done his own thing.
You also think Pakistan slow, low pitches, and it was in the first Test match. So therefore, why Mark Wood? How does he fit into England's plan? What does he do then? What does he give them?
The hostile short pitch bowling that we saw them
even on a slow, low pitch?
Yeah, absolutely, because England did it, didn't they, to get that shine off the ball. But I mean, he is genuinely quick, so he can surprise with that fuller ball as well. But I would hope that he runs in and just bowls fast. I mean, West Indies, great fast bowlers, they had success out here. The great Malcolm Marshall running up and bowling as Malcolm Marshall would bowl, that fuller length. You don't have to come in and bowl that short pitch stuff. I suspect they'll use him to do that, because Pakistan actually showed a bit of a weakness to it, and Atif was saying earlier that they are under pressure here to be more positive, and they are. I mean, how they will come back after that first Test defeat, which I picked up. I mean, I don't read all the newspapers terribly well. I'm sure Atif probably understands it more than I do, but they've had some stick, haven't they? And just to come back here and be defensive and be negative, I don't think is going to be good enough.
No, it won't. And there's been so much talked about the surface. I mean, I know we had Babar Azam in the post-match press conference saying that he was hoping for more turn in the pitch, and you know, Ramiz Raja came on and gave an interview to Yagas, and he said he was very disappointed in the pitch and that it would take several years for pitches to improve in the country, whereas some people point to the fact that, well, as recently as last year we had very exciting pitches, so the reason the pitch was flat is because you wanted it to be flat. So let's be transparent about that. I mean, looking at the surface today as well, I mean, Azhar Ali was there and he was giving us a little his insights, and he said, I reckon it'll turn a little bit, and this surface has a bit of moisture here.
It's been shaved as well. The two ends.
Yeah.
I think they've had the old scrubbing brushes out.
It's got lots more cracks in it as well, and so they may well be superficial cracks for all we know, but compared to the look of the pitch on day one in Rawalpindi, this one looks a little bit more worn, which makes me think, and Pakistan is a reactive country in terms of their planning, it makes me think they're thinking, okay, we need to come up with a spin counter-attack to the pace barrage of England. They won't forget that last day where England, basically the seamers got those wickets through sheer will of force almost on a surface that gave them nothing. Now they need to give their own bowlers something, and with the seamers sort of, you know, a bit of question mark about their experience or their form or what have you, I think it's the spinners who they're banking on to do well here in Multan.
And just a thought as well, by bringing in Wood, that's a tail to match Pakistan's now, which of course was so much of a factor in that first Test match. A long tail, setting sun, all the excitement and the pressure and so on. Well, England are going to have a longish tail too. With Robinson at 8, okay, he's probably a 9, isn't he? So he's one a bit higher than you'd expect to be. But it has made that tail an opportunity, therefore, for Pakistan if they do get this wicket.
Should England be a bit worried about Wood? He hasn't played a lot of cricket recently.
I think worried is probably not necessarily the right word, because if he wasn't fit, he wouldn't be here. If he wasn't going to be fit, he wouldn't be playing. But he has I don't want to say the word habit, but he has got a habit of breaking down. And, when was the last time Wood actually got through a whole series without picking up a niggle of some sort? So there's always going to be that slight concern, but they wouldn't throw him in the deep end if he wasn't fit and ready.
But he's a very physical fast bowler and slightly built. He's not your big, strong, absorb all the pain and the bruising and the impact of bowling fast. He is slender and he's fragile. That's probably, you wouldn't like me saying that, but he is not your classically built fast bowler, and he really works hard, doesn't he? He comes tearing in, he hits that crease very hard indeed. Every ball is a real test, an examination of his body. So it's hardly surprising, really, that he has got this injury record, and hardly surprising, therefore, in this case, that they've given him that little bit of cover and protection, and they have kept that five-man bowling attack.
If he bowls anything like he did during the T20 World Cup that we've just seen out in Australia, he will be quick, he will be hostile, and he will be everything this cricket team is about now, being exciting to watch and reinventing Test cricket.
And it's not hot. That's I mean, the sun's shining and so on, but it's low 20s. It's not like it's baking hot here, and it wasn't certainly in the last game. And of course, Jimmy Anderson bowled a lot of overs there. But it wasn't one of those where you often see when you're watching the telly at home, an England cricket team overseas, and they're just pouring sweat and their shirts are soaking. It's not that sort of weather at all. So it's a bit like being at home, really, if you're honest about the sort of summer temperatures. And there's shortish days as well because of the light. So I think from a fast bowling perspective, it's no harder work than bowling at home. You don't get the same help on the pitch that you do, and you've got to really keep a very positive mindset about bowling. And if ball does keep low, or does go through slowly, you've got to actually put that as a positive thing in your mind. So, the batsmen actually won't like that very much because it's kept a bit low, and rather than thinking, look at this thing, how am I going to flog some life out of this? You've got to try and keep it in a positive way. But otherwise, as far as the workload is concerned, it's no different to playing at home.
Atif, how much of Pakistan thinking, we don't really want Mark Wood playing? We saw in the T20 series, I know it's a completely different form of the game, England's quick bowlers troubled some of the Pakistan batters with short balls.
Well, the batters that they have in this lineup are very good, particularly in the Test team, are very good at playing seam bowlers. And I noticed some of the batters having a hit a bit earlier were against the quicker net bowlers that they could find. So word has obviously gotten around that Mark Wood is going to be playing. I mean, I don't think they'll fear him necessarily, but I do expect Wood to be able to be an X-factor player for England, as he so often is. But I do feel that I would struggle to see Mark Wood getting through 2 Test matches in these conditions, because even though it's not oppressively hot, as Agaz is saying, these are difficult conditions. They're not bowling friendly conditions for anybody, particularly seam bowlers in the kind of heat, and the conditions will not give you very much, you imagine, as a seam bowler. The spinners, you expect to get a little something out of it, and this is why the discussion in the Pakistan side has not been that centered around seam bowlers. Originally there was discussion about drafting somebody from outside the squad in, like Mohammad Abbas or Hassan Ali. Both have been in discussion, but in the end they've opted to stick with the squad that they've got, because I think the emphasis from Pakistan won't be on seam at all. It'll be on spin.
Okay, so what do they do? A very inexperienced attack in the last game. Lots of players making their debuts. I mean, to be honest, it looked a pretty threadbare attack. England made it look like that, the way they played. What are Pakistan's options for change in this game?
I think the challenge for them was that some of their more attacking bowlers, and Naseem was the most experienced of the bowlers in that lineup, which isn't saying very much. He's not played much Test cricket himself. But Haris Rauf, he's been around the team for such a long time. He's played white ball cricket all over the place. They threw him into this Test side with high expectations, and of course he got injured, so he wasn't a factor in the second innings at all. But I think right now Pakistan have the option to go to Mohammad Wasim, who is another debutant. He's a very promising bowler, had a good World Cup.
He played in the T20 World Cup final.
He did, indeed. And he'd played in the 7-match T20 series against England as well. So he's become a part of the core squad, as it were. So they might well give him a go. But I think Fahim Ashraf will be nailed down. Now, he's a bit like Muhammad Ali, but he's got a lot of experience playing Test cricket, a good record playing Test cricket. And he's sort of fancied as an all-rounder as well. So he can bat a bit. It lengthens your batting lineup, and it gives you a bit more experience. So while he may not get a better result or get more wickets quickly, he will be able to, you imagine, just slow down those high-scoring passages that England seem to have. What they managed to do so well on the first day was just dominate all the way through the day. There was no respite for the bowlers. The bowlers were just being pounded. It was pure carnage. What you want in that scenario is someone with a bit of experience. Just slow things down, try something a little bit different, be happy to be defensive for a short while, and Fahim is the guy to do that, and I reckon he's getting a start.
Poor old Mahmood went round the park in the last game, 34 years of age, making his Test debut, 4 for 235.
I'd like to see how they can play him. I mean, I know it was his first Test, but I know he got 4 wickets, but that's absolute hammering. If he comes back, perhaps they will play him. There's young Abrar, isn't there? The other wrist spinner. Perhaps they play them both. I mean, they've got to do something, because all those bowlers, Asim Shah, who went through quite a long stretching process down there that was noted, I think. So I hope he's okay. Ali 124 to go for 235 runs and to be played quite so disdainfully.
And that was just in one innings. He went for over 300 in the game.
And 2 of those wickets of the 4 in the first innings were Robinson and Anderson. You've got to have a pretty special temperament to come back with confidence from that. And you can see Zach Crawley, who's a tall, imposing figure, striding out to bat full of confidence. This got a real challenge for Pakistan. Confidence batting and bowling after what happened up there. That's going to be their main issue, I think. They've got to get minds right before this Test match.
The difference between the 2 Test matches is when we saw the pitch at the last Test match, we were like, wow, that is not going to offer anything. That is going to stay the same throughout the 5 days, and it did. This one here, the first thing that we've picked up on after, having just a quick look at it and speaking to certain members of staff from both teams, it's going to turn. So actually, you want your spinners in. It's just whether or not they chop and change their spinners. But this is a wicket where spin will be really important.
And absolutely, I can totally see Pakistan playing 2 spinners. I think they'll persist with Zahid and potentially bring in Abrar as well, and maybe sacrifice Salman Ali Agha, which would feel really harsh because he played really well, but it's the needs of the ground at the moment. And I mean, we made a lot of that 235 for 4 wickets, but I think it's just for a little bit of, Jack Leach went for nearly 200 as well, for his 2 wickets in the first innings. It was that kind of ground. So I think there should be an element of sort of reserve judgment on Zahid, and I'm certain with the fondness that they feel for him in the Pakistan setup. I mean, they played him out of just seniority. It was almost like a testimonial, the way Saq Lane explained it in the press conference. He said, well, he's been with the team for a year, so we can't let this new young chap jump the queue. They have a genuine fondness for him, and I remember the media manager for the team also sent him out to do a press conference just so he had experience of doing a press conference. So I'm pretty sure he'll play.
I suppose the difference is that Zahid went close on 7 and over, and Jack Leach went close on 4 and over. I mean, psychologically, that's very different. Just talk about the psychology, actually, of coming up against this England side in this sort of mood as well. I mean, Pakistan play their way, England play their way. I do think Pakistan would have been, England really got amongst them in that last game.
I had a chat with Azhar. He happened to be looking at the pitch, but having a look at it, and he's a very friendly chap. And I said, come on, do you think other teams are going to copy this then? And he said, but it's not that easy. You've got to have the right people to be able to do it. And he wasn't quite saying, we'll keep playing our way, but he was sort of talking about the difficulties adopting something.
But there's half the problem, isn't it? It's a mindset thing. That's all. This England team is basically the same team that we saw a year ago. A couple of changes. It's a mindset thing. So when you're asking him that and he's saying, oh, no, they're not even in the right mindset to even try.
No, I mean, the way Crawley played, if you look at Crawley last summer to Crawley batting last week, there's like 2 different people, and that fear of failure, if you like. I mean, he played really well at Old Trafford, to be fair, but that fear of failure has been eradicated, and it's a giant step. It's a lot of what Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum say is not new. It's not new at all. In fact, it's the stuff that it's been talked about for years in cricket. Played in the head and fear of failure, all that sort of stuff. But what the difference is, they actually mean it. And the players believe it and trust it, and that's why they're going out and playing as they are.
Do you sense that England got another gear or 2 to go into? It doesn't feel like it, is it? The way they've played so far, it feels as though they're in 5th.
I'll tell you what I do want
going
to see,
downhill.
And I know people say, "Oh, shut up." I do want to see them be more flexible about their approach, because for whatever people can shout and yell about the 750 and stuff, and I've seen people have. It wasn't me that said they should score 750.
It was them, wasn't it?
It was them that said they wanted to score 750 in the first innings, and they didn't get them. They fell 100 runs short. And so you do have to be flexible. You could still play positively, still play away. But if the core of your game is played like this, the way they're playing it, but they are able to adapt at times to be able to just throttle back ever so. I'm not talking about going into reverse. I'm just talking about just making sure that you achieve your objective. And actually, because if you do that, then winning the game is probably easier. So it was them that wanted to score 750. That was their target, and they fell well short. So I would like to see just that flexibility. It doesn't have to be all-out total attack. It would be a cleverer approach if they can actually juggle it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to put limitations on what this England team is capable of at the moment, because what they achieved in the first game was spectacular. I mean, so many people saying this is one of the greatest wins of all time. And Jimmy Anderson said it was one of the greatest wins of all time. He's played 176 tests. So, you get the feeling that there's no real ceiling for this team, and the level of belief and the enjoyment they have in their game right now. I mean, they could come here and beat their total from the first innings of the first match.
I just think when you speak to Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum, they are so clear on what they want to achieve, and that is providing entertainment. And you know what? Ben Stokes will do whatever it takes. And this team have been so good to watch in the last 6 months. They're a completely different side to what we've seen in the previous few years. And I think respect to how they've changed the same player's mindset to go out there and be positive. As we said, Zach Crawley looks like a completely different player. They all do. And the biggest thing for me is they're having fun out there. They're reminding themselves on what Test cricket is about. It is the pinnacle, and they want to provide entertainment, and that is exactly what they are doing.
I mean, traditionally, when you come to Pakistan, well, I mean, England haven't been in this sort of position they are in Pakistan very often, if indeed at all. You go 1-0 up in the series, you go, right, batten down the series, chaps, don't give them anything. I mean, do you think England will dangle the carrot or put the bowl of carrots out, as someone suggested the other day?
The whole cabbage patch. Do you know what?
Absolutely.
This England side wouldn't surprise me if they came away and they'd lost 2-1. They said, oh, well, we won the first game. It was good, though, wasn't it?
I think, they're not the kind of park the bus type England team. They're here to win every single game. I really like that approach from Brendan McCullum, where he treats every single game as this, like, forget about the next series or the next tour. We're here in this game, live in this moment and win this match. It's really refreshing, actually, to have somebody that forthright at the head of one of the world's biggest cricket teams. But yeah, I see them absolutely giving Pakistan an in, as it were. Like, they're not just going to go out there and play defensive cricket and play for the draw. They will try and make a game of this, and Pakistan will have an opportunity to get back into the series.
We are learning about England and the way they and this approach. Having really done the hard yards in winning the first test, I do hope that there is that common sense as well, that if they can't win this game, well, don't lose it. Don't just be kamikaze.
Well, that's the traditional way, isn't it, of playing? Yeah. But Alex is shaking her head there.
Well, don't lose it. Why throw a game away?
Well,
here's something
interesting. On that final afternoon between lunch and tea, England were just getting under a bit of pressure, and there was a 2.25 hour session, and they bowled only 25 overs. They had the seamers on. There was a sort of hint of pragmatism there.
There was, absolutely. And they could always employ that. So while it was a very bold declaration, they did have tools in their armoury that they could have employed to make sure that the sun actually prevented Pakistan from winning, and slowing things down, of course, with the run rate required just mounting slightly, did put pressure on Pakistan. But it's pointless to come and just throw a series away.
I don't think they'll throw it away, but they will go for a win. They've said we do not want to draw
but if you can't
cricket.
win, then you don't just go recklessly to lose it, do you?
I genuinely like to see them put in a difficult position where they're not in control of the game, just to see how they respond to it.
So what would that look like for our listeners? What would that look like?
So if Pakistan bat on day one and they play at sort of 3.5 and over and get themselves to 560, 570. Now there's 3 days left in the game, and you've got to try and come back into the game. Now in that scenario,
try and win from there.
Try and win from there. Yeah. So you've got to get enough runs to get a lead, and then try and bowl out the other side, and you've got 3 days to do it. How aggressively do you go? If you lose those wickets up front, so if you're now reduced to 80 for 4, do you still push on with that? Let's go hard. Let's try and go 6 runs and over. Or do you think, okay, hold on, we got to scale?
Follow on.
Do you know what England would do? Bat once, get 1,000, and only bat once.
You're very new to this, Alex, aren't you?
I just love the way that they're playing their cricket.
We all love that, but we're just learning something about how clever they're going to play.
Yeah.
You haven't just got to throw everything out. You go 1-0 up here. This is an important series. Yeah. Got to win the series.
One thing they're doing as well, sorry Agus, is they're also learning. This is a new style of cricket for them as well. So every time they go out onto the pitch, they're also learning about what is that balance, what is the right way to play this style of cricket.
They will know the value of that lead. I'm sure they won't just chuck it away. But there's been so much talk. They're almost talking themselves into a corner with all this, aren't they? We don't want draws. We don't want this. Well, sometimes you're going to have to. You're going to have to.
Well, they're only 10 minutes away from a draw in the last game.
You are going to have to save a game, because that's what makes Test cricket what it is. And Test cricket's draws are often very tense and exciting, and they're not boring. Yeah, you get the occasional boring draw, but if you're wanting to generate exciting cricket, it doesn't mean to say that you can't have draws, because draws could be the most tense outcome to a test match.
I was going to say, I just heard a remarkable thing from one of the journalists after the last game. They mentioned the fact that the Pakistan Super League, the franchise T20 competition in this country, has its draft during the third test match in Karachi. So they suspected that the England batters were just auditioning, really, just using a test match to get a T20 contract, which kind of happened. It could happen with this England team if you think about it.
Somewhere along the line, though, we're going to see England bowled out for 160, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going to see them bowled out for 70, but we've seen them be bowled out for 70 3 or 4 times in the last 6 or 7 years, so it's not like we haven't seen it.
They'll do it quickly this time. It won't take 2 days to do it.
Yes, I mean, they were very low ebb. I mean, this actually, a year ago, was the first day of the Ashes Test match. Rory Burns was knocked over first ball, and England were bowled out for 147, and that series went really badly, and then the West Indies series went poorly as well. It did need some sort of change. We're still pinching ourselves a bit, aren't we? Because we can't quite believe what we're seeing. We have seen 3 of the greatest England wins just this year. The victory at Trent Bridge, when they smashed it after tea, the incredible chase against India at Edgbaston, and what we saw the other day.
The only thing missing was Johnny Bairstow.
But if you take it from March, at the last test in Grenada, where it's like a car crash, to have come where they have is extraordinary. There's no way you thought that was possible. I was talking to some English supporters here the other evening. They were there, and they had the same sort of sinking feeling as I did when I drove away that day. You thought, what on earth? How are they going to pick themselves up from this? And here we are, 1-0 up in Pakistan. It seems remarkable.
England declared once in that last test match. Can you see a scenario in this game? We talked about smog and the shorter days. Can you see a scenario where they have to declare twice in this game to try to force it?
I can see Ben Stokes doing anything. I can, honestly. If he thinks that's his best chance of winning the game, then he'll do it. Absolutely, he'll do it. Yeah, I did say, I thought his captaincy that final afternoon was outstanding. I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, it's completely different. Those umbrella fields, and he'll get off confidence from that. Captains need they need confidence as like batsmen or bowlers or anything else does. You have to have confidence in your own ability as a captain and your judgment. And so he's on cloud 9.
I think it's the bravery that he shows as captain, isn't it? He's played under Joe Root, who we've seen a completely different style of cricket to what Ben Stokes is doing. The bravery and how he goes about his captaincy is some of the best captaincy that I've seen in such a long time.
But you get pounded down the ground. Long off goes back. I know, this is Test cricket, but even so, you'd be inclined to put them back. They never went back. No. They never went back. At times, Leach was bowling without anybody on the boundary, although the ball was still disappearing. It was very brave, very brave. Really, a whole new direction really in captaincy, and it does make sense. If you've got batsmen who do find themselves under pressure as a result of that, you're going to win games. That's what happened the other day.
Well, we're all really looking forward to this second test match. We can't. It was a bit like that England one-day side when they changed things after 2015. You actually went excited to watch an England one-day international. It's not that we weren't excited to go and watch a test match, but I think we're even more excited. You just don't quite know what is going to happen. So play gets underway at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're on air on 5 Live Sports Extra and BBC Sounds from 4:25 in the morning here on 5 Live. We're going to discuss where England's win in Rawalpindi ranks in the list of England's overseas wins. This is Ben Stokes' view.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue, to be honest. I think not, just because of the fact that we got the result, but I think in the way in which we took the 5 days on in a very positive way, with the ball and obviously with the bat. Just to take 20 wickets on that wicket, I think, was just a remarkable effort from everyone involved. Just the buy-in is very crucial, and everyone really believing in the process in which we're going to do, and obviously the confidence that we can take out of last week into this week is going to be huge for us, knowing that we might find ourselves in a similar situation, and the boys going into that, we could be bowling on day 5 again. Just carrying the confidence over from that we bowled Pakistan out on the last day, is going to be massive for us. But the big one is let's just not get conservatives this week and be happy that we're 1-0 up, because we'll certainly be trying to leave here 2-0.
Well, that's the Ben Stokes view on England's victory in Rawalpindi. And we've been debating, and I'm sure you have at home as well, ever since England's win on Monday, where this ranks in terms of England's overseas wins. They've actually won in their whole history since 1877. 155 test matches away from home. But we are going to go back and use 1990 as the starting point. And they've played 186 away test matches since then. I'll explain why we're going to go 1990 at the moment. Because that was the game which England beat that wonderful West Indies side away from home, and it was their first time they'd beaten West Indies in West Indies for 17 years, and the West Indies had dominated the 1980s. Before we go back and just look at some of the games that this England team had sort of tried to match and go beyond, we should look at some of the factors that made it such a good victory, such a phenomenal achievement. I think things like the flatness of the pitch, the illness in the England camp in the lead up to the match, England missing some players, Johnny Bairstow not playing, Ben Foakes not playing, specialist wicketkeeper, Mark Wood, Stuart Broad. And the simple fact is that England just don't win in Pakistan very often. It was only their third victory here in 25 matches. Jonathan is still with me. I'm also joined now by the former England off-spinner Vic Marks and the TMS statsman Andy Zaltzman, who perhaps can adjudicate for all of us. So what's our criteria? Is it degree of difficulty, context around the game?
I think context is really important because it's the background factors, I think, that really make those victories that we'll discuss that little bit more special. It makes them stand out. It's not just a question of England rocking up, winning a match, albeit against the odds, and you had to say that to beat Pakistan here, it's against the odds. They've only done it twice before. It is the illness, it is the pitch, it is the record, it is the missing players. It's all of those sorts of things that actually give that rounded context to why a particular victory is very special.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. There've been some dead rubber wins that have been in isolation, fantastic wins, but we don't sort of remember them in quite the same way. This doesn't count as a dead rubber win because it's the first match, and it is undoubtedly one of the most unlikely wins I've ever witnessed. And sad to say, I was witnessing that first one you mentioned in Jamaica. That was unlikely for a different reason, because it was against the West Indies, who England had lost to. It was my first ever day as a journalist, actually, or as a first match report. 90 for 1 at lunch, West Indies. You got a file at lunchtime, and that was a freakish run out from Devon Malcolm.
Yes.
And I had to write something. And I think, although I've never wanted to revisit it, the thrust of my piece, of a match that ended with an epic victory, was how could they possibly leave Eddie Hemmings out? Which is not a piece I want to revisit.
Who was an off-spinner.
Yes.
Zoltz?
Oh, yeah, so I guess in judging how great a win is, another factor would be quality of opposition, and looking at the Pakistan side in the first test, they were up against a pretty strong batting lineup, particularly in home conditions, but a very weak bowling lineup. Was the most inexperienced in terms of test wickets that Pakistan has fielded since their very early years in test cricket in the 1950s. They had a piece on the BBC website outlining the statistics that highlighted quite what an unusual game of cricket and what an extraordinary performance it was, and a lot of those stats were around the batting and all the fast scoring records they broke in both innings. But one of the most amazing statistics that came out of me that highlighted what an extraordinary win it was for England was that fourth innings. 9 wickets by seamers. If Ollie Pope or Joe Root had taken that catch off Naseem Shah when he edged it between them for 4, it would have been all 10 by seamers in the fourth innings of a test in Asia, and no team has done that since 1993, either Asian or visiting. So in a way, that I think sort of was almost the most remarkable part of that victory, was that it was achieved through seam bowling on the final day. So yeah, back to that game in 1990, in the context of England winning in the West Indies. The West Indies had been totally dominant in Test cricket for well over a decade. England hadn't beaten them in a match since the 1973-74 series in West Indies, and England themselves had won, I think, 3 of their previous 40 Test matches. They'd won 2 on Gatting's tour of Australia and a home test against Sri Lanka, and had lost pretty much all their series. I think they had a 0-0 draw in New Zealand. So England wins were extremely rare. Great West Indian side. England went there with a really inexperienced bowling attack. I think that first test was Devon Malcolm, Angus Fraser, Gladstone Small and David Capel. None of whom had played a significant amount of Test cricket, and yet they managed to win in the West Indies against one of the greatest teams of all time.
And in the unlikeliest category, Karachi comes into that. In fact, a lot of wickets fell to seamers in the third innings at Karachi. Not all of them, but
So
a lot of
Karachi
them.
2000, England win in the dark by 7 wickets.
I know, and talk about get your runs quickly so you can bowl them out. Well, we didn't quite do that because epically we scored at 2 point something or other with Atherton getting 100 and Hussain getting 70. I love the stat Andy gave us after 75 overs in Rawalpindi, England 506 for 4. After 75 overs in Karachi, England 149 for 1. It's a cracking stat, that.
Well, yeah, because I mentioned actually some of the 5 factors actually against England in Rawalpindi. There's actually one factor in their favour, and that is their approach, that bold, aggressive form of cricket that we witnessed all last summer. So there were things against England, but there was that one big thing in their favour in that match.
Yeah, and it is exciting to watch. They just about got away with it in Karachi with a different sort of run rate, but it required a Pakistan collapse on that third final day of that match.
Well, it was incredible. I mean, they were what, 3 wickets down going into the final day, and it was a nailed-on draw. And you just kind of accepted it was going to be. But why Moeen got quite so defensive and negative to the point that Steve Buckner, the umpire, thought, well, there's no way there's going to be any bad light here. You can slow things down as much as you like. You can mess around, but...
that was Moeen, the Pakistan wicketkeeper.
Yeah, he was the captain.
Yeah,
not our Moeen.
He doesn't get defensive very often.
And so, in a way, Steve Buckner punished them, and it was quite right. I mean, I'm not sure he could do it these days with the light meters and take readings and so on, as it is. But Steve Buckner was a senior umpire, very respected, and he simply didn't like to see deliberate time wasting like that. It was so dark. I was sitting outside, and it was during Ramadan. So obviously the locals couldn't eat or drink during daylight hours. Sunrise to sunset, you fast. The Pakistan journalists round me were eating. They'd broken into their food boxes. The sun had actually set. And we can talk about the light the other night and the light, this match and so on. I promise you, the sun had set. It was that dark. And you really couldn't see the ball. I mean, Graham Thorpe, if he'd got out, I'm not quite sure, perhaps suppose England would have won, but I just remember him playing what was clearly a cover drive to win the game. But had it gone out there? I don't know. We weren't commentating at the time, but did it? I mean, I'm not sure I've seen it yet. But that is actually how dark it was. It had to be beyond sunset because the locals had broken their fast.
On another unlikely one, but it comes into the dead rubber category more or less, was Barbados, wasn't it? 94. England have just been bowled out in Trinidad when they were very well placed to win the game for 46. Athers is captain. And the whole tour seems to be falling apart. They went and played on one of the little islands.
Grenada, I think.
Grenada. They lost in Grenada. There were crises of all sorts. I think Nasser Hussain was being marched around the boundary by Graham Gooch for some transgression on the field of some sort. And then they went to Barbados, where they'd not won for 60-odd years.
Yep.
And somehow, from somewhere, England win. Alex Stewart scores 200. We never saw that one coming either. The only flaw in that one, from our criteria, is I don't think they could win the series, but they never won in Barbados 60 years, and Alex Stewart plays like a god, and the wickets fall.
That feat is nothing compared to Phil Tufnell taking that running catch to catch Brian Lara.
Yeah. Well, if he's listening, I'm sure he will.
We'd all assume he's going to drop it.
Yeah.
So that Barbados, we're going to dispatch that match. Although it was a great win for England. Unlikely. We're going to dispatch that match. And I think Zoltz actually is nodding his head.
He doesn't like it either.
No, I love that game. It was a classic. Angus Fraser had 8 wickets in the first innings. I think Caddick had a 5 in the second. Really great team performance.
46 all out.
And following
Touring
3-0 down.
Chaos.
I think live games in a series do need to take precedence.
Okay, here's another live game. Let's move on to Mumbai 2006. What's sort of known as the Ring of Fire Test match, but I prefer to think of it as the why did Rahul Dravid put England into bat in the first innings Test match. And England won by 212 runs. Sean Udall played. Monty was underneath those catches from Dhoni, and he dropped one of them. He just didn't even get near one, actually, and he caught another one. Everyone was stunned. And that was a remarkable England win to level the series.
There are bits of this game I'm not happy with, if I'm honest. And that included Rahul Dravid putting England in.
He's probably thinking outside the box, like the current lot.
Well, perhaps he was. But
Save time.
He put them in, England got 400. That was a very strange decision. Dhoni's batting. We talk about saving the game in the first half. You know, he lobbed a catch-up for Monty, who didn't lay hand on it. A steepling catch, mid-off, didn't lay hand on it. So what does he do on 5? He does it again. It's as if he was just trying to get out. I'm not going to put that out there, but it was a really strange game of cricket, that. And yeah, the Ring of Fire and all that, and England came
We
back
should
with
just
it.
explain Ring of
Sure
Fire,
do.
shouldn't we?
Well, they played it during tea, didn't they? Johnny Cash at full bore off their music machine.
They played it during the Ashes, didn't they, as well?
I don't know, but they certainly played it there, and Freddie put it down to Ring of Fire and Johnny Cash. I don't know, but MS Dhoni's innings there was beyond bizarre, and poor old Monty, he clung on to the second one and immediately rushed off the field, and there were one or two rumours as to
that can
why it
happen.
was. Well, he might have been rather nervous as he was under the catch, but anyway, he did come back afterwards.
I'm with you. That would not get my vote. But Mumbai 2012, Mike.
Well, before we get to Mumbai 2012, let's just go through chronologically. But Zolt, you want to say something?
Well, I was going to go to that. The other Mumbai Test match. So one we've not touched on yet. If we're going back a little, it's a great win in South Africa. The winter before England won the famous 2005 Ashes, they'd had a tremendous year. They'd won in West Indies. They'd won all 7 home tests against New Zealand and West Indies in the 2004 summer, and went to South Africa and had a tremendous series win, sealed in the fourth. Well, they went ahead in the fourth test in Johannesburg. The fifth test was drawn, but that Johannesburg test was a classic England victory. Strauss made 147 in the first innings runs for Key and Vaughan, and then South Africa actually passed England's total. Then a fantastic century from Marcus Trescothick, made 180 out of 332 for 9 declared, took him just 248 balls. And then Matthew Hoggard with 7 in the second innings to make 12 in the match, bowled South Africa out in a thrilling last day, and England won that series away from home. It was an amazing victory, and a sort of landmark in the development of that side that went on to beat the great
What were
Australians.
Jimmy Anderson's figures in that? Because he got plucked from nowhere, and they said, the ball's going to swing. And I spent quite a lot of time with Jimmy on that tour, and he was really upset. He hadn't bowled a ball, and they suddenly decided that the ball was going to swing. Let's bring in Jimmy Anderson to bowl. I don't think he got a single wicket, did he?
He got 2 for 117
there we go.
off 28 overs. He'd have to bowl 100 overs to concede 117 these days, and then 6 expensive overs in the second innings.
I'd actually rather go forward a bit to another South Africa Test match, one in Durban in 2009. And this is a South African side. Talk about context. This is a South African side that contained Graham Smith, Amla, Callis, de Villiers, Steyn, Morkel and Tini. It was an excellent team. And in Durban in 2009, England beat them by an innings and 98 runs. I remember Graham Swan being instrumental in bowling South Africa out on the final day of that Test match. I mean, that was another great England victory. It's funny though, actually, England have done for some reason, England have always done quite well in South Africa.
They would go to Australia with the same team, by and large, and get thrashed, and go to a very strong South African side, as you point out, and generally compete extremely well and sometimes win. That Durban match, I don't think I was there.
Stuart Broad. Everyone talks about Graham Swan, but actually Stuart Broad's spell in that second innings was what really demolished. He got the big wickets, de Villiers and so on. He got out that middle order, and that was what really set, I think, up that
Yeah, 9 wickets between them. Swan 5 for 54, Broad for 4 for.
But look who he got
43.
out.
It was there were Callis, de Villiers, Duminy and Boucher.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.
The only thing I prefer about the Johannesburg game, so that was an absolute thumping one-sided game, whereas Johannesburg, actually, at the start of play, I think you probably thought South Africa had the better chance of winning, and then Trescothick turned it round by getting stacks of runs in the morning with the tail, and there wasn't much time left.
And that was a great South African attack as well. Pollock and Tini, Steyn and Callis and Nicky Boyer bowling some spin.
I've got one to bring up since everyone's throwing these games in. It hasn't been mentioned. We are going to go back. Sorry, Simon.
That's all right.
Christchurch 92, first Test match in the series against New Zealand. On the last day, England needed 7 wickets to win the match. That is a nailed-on draw. In anybody's language, that's a drawn game. Tuffers bowled them out, and it was a tremendous finale because Martin Crowe worked out that if he just hit a boundary, it would take enough time to eat into the 10 minutes between innings. The last pair were together, and therefore, if anyone got out, they wouldn't get back on the field again. It would be a draw. But he miscued it, and miscued a horrible catch-up for Derek Pringle to take at mid-on. And Tuffers was the hero, but it's an absolute collapse. I think John Wright suddenly, from somewhere, a very experienced player, suddenly was consumed by nerves. And it's just a great illustration of what can happen and why you never count a game safe.
Yeah, he was.
until it is actually saved.
John Wright, who was extremely focused, pretty dogged, lovely man, lovely cricketer, but slow. He was stumped. Russell bowled Tufnell for 99.
And I'll tell you something else. He was the second 99 in the match because
Dipak
Patel got
yeah.
99 as well. So it was quite
And
unusual.
the other admirable thing about that from Tufnell's point of view is that my recollection is it wasn't really, it was offering, but it wasn't really spinning much. He had to be sort of wheedled out. What were his figures?
His figures 7 for 47 from 46.1.
That was incredible.
Okay.
Yeah, it was absolutely extraordinary.
McCullum wasn't playing then.
Tuffers is getting good raps tonight. I really hope he is listening.
Well, I don't know why we're sucking up to him, but it was an amazing victory from nowhere, really, and a lovely piece of bowling. I got one or two before we go back to. I mean, I like. Well, you haven't mentioned victories in Australia. Why
well,
is
we're
that?
going to. That's because we're going to.
Well, I
Victor,
don't know. I haven't got the schedule here.
Well, let's do it now. Melbourne 2010. I mean, that's the game I think that most people would look at and say, Australia dominated for so long. England has struggled to go to Australia and tramp. They had one in Adelaide.
Well, I like Adelaide,
series.
actually. I like Adelaide because it was flat in Adelaide, and Australia, after 10 minutes, were 2 for 3. And that's 2 runs and 3 wickets that way. Or were they 3 for 2? I don't know, but they were struggling.
That Melbourne Test in which England won the Ashes for the first time since 1986-7 will be my favourite. For something really, really.
I think it will
really
be a lot of people's favourites as well, because beating Australia in Australia is such a big achievement. England do it so rarely.
It hasn't happened again. When will it happen again? Goodness only knows. But at least once in my career, I've seen England win the Ashes in Australia. It's the only time. And if you think that Australia were bowled out for 98 on Boxing Day, and we've all been very lucky and gone to that Boxing Day, the opening day of that Test match in Australia, it's a massive event. It's a huge social day in the Melbourne sporting calendar, and there they were, 80-odd thousand of them, all there to come and see. Well, I don't think I was quite sure, but bear in mind that England had actually been hammered in the previous test in Perth, as they usually are, and so things were still alive. This was not a dead series, far from it, and the Australians had come roaring back, Ryan Harris and all that in Perth, but England stuck him in, they had the confidence to put him in, bowled him out for 98, and by tea on that first day, most of that 80,000 had gone off to the Boxing Day sales in town. They just couldn't bear watching anymore, and at the close of play, England were 157 for no wicket. Just an incredible opening day.
Well, I guess if you're judging greatest wins, I don't know if you factor in whether the bowling and the batting had to do extraordinary things. So I guess in that game, the bowling was so good on the day one that the batting was slightly less pressured. There's also, people talk about that Australian side in 2010-11 as one of the weaker Australian sides. But looking at the lineup, it was still a pretty strong team. Shane Watson and Phil Hughes opening the batting. And Watson actually was one of the most statistically consistent opening batters of Test cricket at the time. Ricky Ponting, Michael Clarke, Michael Hussey, a young Steve Smith, before he became a top-level Test player. Then Brad Haddin and the bowlers, Mitchell Johnson, Ryan Harris, Peter Siddle and Ben Hilfenhaus. It's quite a strong Australian team. We sort of kind of remember the extent of English dominance and maybe don't remember that it was actually a pretty strong side that they were taking
had hammered
to
England
pieces.
in the previous test and were coming back to actually to try and save the Ashes. But you were there with me, Victor, so I've got photographs to prove it, going out there at the end onto the field for the first and possibly the only time that we'll do it in our careers, to actually celebrate, or be there among the celebrations of the players when they won the Ashes in Australia. It was a very, very special thing. It's just one of those occasions that we'll never forget.
It was good fun going out there because, I was in there. I was in Australia in 86-7, but that was a less dramatic win in a curious way for a team that couldn't bat, bowl or field.
Did we ever get onto that, the second Mumbai victory?
No, we're just about to now.
Okay.
So there are 2 more Test matches to go that we should consider. And Mumbai 2012, when England beat India by 10 wickets. And I remember very clearly, India batted first in that game. It was the game in which Kevin Peterson made an absolute genius 100, Alistair Cook made a fine 100 as well. I remember an England player telling me at the end of that first day, when India had about 280 for 6 on a sort of dusty spinning pitch, he said, I think they've got too many. And England won that match by 10 wickets. So you're talking about degree of difficulty. I suppose degree of difficulty from the situation they were in after that first day.
They'd lost the first
thrashed
test
in the first test.
Yeah.
Without only really Alistair Cook getting runs. Alistair Cook got a sort of face-saving 100 to prove it was possible to play against these Indian spinners, Ashwin and co. I mean, that's right at the top. I mean, it could be at the top of my list because it looked like the series was going the way of so many other series in India. Yeah. Peterson was, of course, there was all sorts of things were happening. It was debatable whether he'd go on that tour. It was post-Strauss-Kahn captaincy. He did go on the tour. First test loss.
They were the
As you say,
bat.
280 off for
Yeah.
6. The ball's already turning at the Wankhede Stadium. And then I don't know how many England scored, but big 100 and a fast 100. A modern-
413.
What's that? That's how many England got.
Yep.
And Peterson got about 180 of them in very quick time. And Cook got a lot of runs too. There we are. Oh, we've got it here. 122
Yeah.
off 270 for Cook. Peterson 186 off 233, which is not quite McCullum style, but it's getting close.
But there's just one more game to consider very briefly, and that's Chennai 2021. England beat India by 227 runs. Joe Root making 218. It was the first Test match of that series. They went on to lose it. India changed the pitches after that. They became Bunsen burners, very difficult pitches for England to bat on. But it was a traditional India pitch in that first game, and England dug in, got 500 and won the game. Now, Zoltz, you've got a theory on this, that it wasn't a great England win because India had been in Australia and England actually been in Sri Lanka, so England were more used to the conditions than India.
I'm not saying it wasn't a great win, but I think there's a bit of context there that England almost had home advantage, but it was still a great win. Joe Root's double 100, some amazing bowling from Anderson, some slightly ropey batting from some of the Indians against England's spinners. But I wouldn't put that anywhere near the two wins in 2012. And to put that series in context, I think between that 2012 win and England's win in 2021, I think India had only lost one home test. So that is one of the toughest tasks in modern cricket.
So, since 1990, England have won 49 times away from home. Which game are you individually going for as England's best away win in that period?
Mumbai 2012.
My heart says Melbourne.
Yeah.
Because it
Well,
was
go
such a
with your heart.
special event. My heart says Melbourne, my head says that Mumbai Test match.
What are you going
I'm
for,
going to go
Sols?
with the very first of those, the first game we talked about in the West Indies in 1990.
I'm going to go for 1990 as well because of its shock value. So, it wasn't a shock that England necessarily beat Pakistan in the last Test. The degree of difficulty was high, actually, to get a result. You wouldn't expect England to lose that game. You'd expect it to be in a draw. So, there's the shock value. If you'd said, before all these Test matches, if you said England are going to win this game, I think that game was the one I was absolutely no chance of beating West Indies in that first Test match in 1990. So, I am going to go for
So we need a
that match.
deciding vote, but I don't know who we're going to get that from.
Well, no, I think we've got 2 and then 1 and 1, haven't we?
Oh, well, maybe, yeah.
But,
yeah.
okay,
Oh,
England.
well, that's because you want to win.
I always like to win, Victor.
I know that.
So that game in Rawalpindi, well, it was a fantastic victory, and so unlikely because of all the factors, all the conditions. But for shock value, well, there we go. I'm going to go for Jamaica in 1990.